I was standing by the dessert table at our family reunion, pretending to examine the homemade apple pie while my cousin Jeremy launched into another one of his success stories, when my phone buzzed with the message that would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened next. Because by the end of this day, the same relatives who had spent years mocking my boring government job would be speechless as Air Force One touched down at Millbrook Regional Airport. And I would finally understand that sometimes the biggest secrets aren't the ones we keep from our family. They're the ones our family keeps from understanding who we really are. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It started like every other Caldwell family reunion in Millbrook, Tennessee. The same folding tables arranged under the same oak trees in Riverside Park, the same potato salad recipe that Aunt Delilah insisted was award-winning, despite never having entered it in any contest, and the same uncomfortable questions about my career that made me want to disappear into the Tennessee hills. "So, Roxanne," my cousin Jeremy said, adjusting his expensive suit jacket even though it was 85 degrees, "still pushing papers for Uncle Sam?" He said it with that particular blend of pity and superiority that I'd grown to expect from family gatherings. Jeremy worked in pharmaceutical sales and never let anyone forget that he drove a BMW and lived in a house with a 3-car garage. I forced a smile and nodded. "Something like that." "Must be nice having all that job security," chimed in my sister Bethany, though her tone suggested it was anything but nice. "No stress, no real deadlines, just showing up and collecting a paycheck." Bethany had married well, a successful contractor named Wade, and they owned a sprawling ranch house on the outskirts of Millbrook that she loved to mention in every conversation. I took a sip of my sweet tea and tried to change the subject, but Uncle Garrett wasn't having it. He was the family patriarch now that Grandpa Caldwell had passed, and he wielded that authority like a weapon at gatherings like this. "I just don't understand why a smart girl like you settled for government work, Roxy," he said, using the childhood nickname I'd asked everyone to stop using years ago. "When I was your age, people with ambition went into business, made something of themselves. Government jobs are for people who can't handle the real world." The circle of relatives around us nodded in agreement. There was my cousin Priscilla, who ran a successful catering business. My brother-in-law Wade, who'd built his construction company from nothing. Even my own mother, Lorraine, who'd spent 30 years as a bank manager before retiring, looked at me with that familiar expression of gentle disappointment. "It's not that simple, Uncle Garrett," I said quietly, but he was already moving on to praise Jeremy's latest sales achievements. This was my reality every year. The Caldwell family reunion, where everyone compared salaries and success stories while I sat quietly in the corner, unable to explain that my boring government job was actually something I couldn't discuss, something that required security clearances and oaths of confidentiality that I took seriously. To them, I was just Roxanne Caldwell, the 34-year-old single woman who worked some mysterious desk job in Washington, D.C., and lived in a modest apartment instead of the sprawling suburban homes they all seemed to favor. "You know what I think?" Bethany said, leaning forward with that look she got when she was about to deliver what she considered profound wisdom. "I think Roxy's afraid of real responsibility. Government jobs are safe. No risk, no reward, but also no real failure. It's like career training wheels." The laughter that followed felt like a slap. These were people who'd known me my entire life, who'd watched me graduate summa cum laude from Tennessee Tech, who'd seen me move to D.C. with dreams and determination. But somewhere along the way, my silence about my actual work had become proof of my mediocrity in their minds. I was about to excuse myself to the restroom, my usual escape route at these gatherings, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my supervisor, Director Harrison. "Code 7 situation developing. Need you in Millbrook ASAP. Check secure email immediately." Code 7. My blood ran cold. In my line of work, Code 7 meant only one thing: a direct threat to national security that required immediate response from specialized personnel. And somehow, it was happening in Millbrook, Tennessee, population 8,847, where the biggest excitement was usually the annual corn festival. I stepped away from the group, my heart pounding as I opened my secure email app. The message was brief but clear. Credible intel suggests attempted security breach during presidential flyover route. Your knowledge of local area essential. Transportation being arranged. Maintain operational security. Presidential flyover route. Through Millbrook. I looked back at my family, still laughing and chatting around the dessert table, completely unaware that their quiet little town was about to become the center of a national security operation. Uncle Garrett was telling someone about his golf game, Jeremy was showing off photos of his new boat, and Bethany was organizing a group photo by the old oak tree. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from a number I recognized, the White House Communications Office. "Agent Caldwell," the voice said when I answered, keeping my voice low and walking toward the parking lot. "This is Deputy Chief of Staff Patricia Williams. Are you in Millbrook, Tennessee?" "Yes, ma'am, at a family gathering." "Perfect. We need you to coordinate local security immediately. The president's flight path has been altered due to weather, and Air Force One will be making an unscheduled landing at Millbrook Regional in approximately 4 hours. We have reason to believe someone with knowledge of this change may have leaked the information to hostile parties." I felt the world tilt slightly. Air Force One, landing in Millbrook. In 4 hours, while my entire extended family was gathered less than 2 miles from the airport. "Ma'am, the airport isn't equipped for. We're sending advance teams now." "But Agent Caldwell, we need someone on the ground who knows the area, knows the people. Someone who can identify anything unusual. You're our eyes and ears until the full security detail arrives." I looked back at the reunion, at my family who thought I shuffled papers for a living, and realized that in about 4 hours they were going to discover exactly what my boring government job actually entailed. "Understood, ma'am. I'll coordinate with local law enforcement and establish a perimeter." "And Agent Caldwell? This operation is classified at the highest levels. You know the protocols." I did know the protocols, which meant that for the next few hours I would have to continue pretending to be just plain Roxanne, while secretly coordinating one of the most complex security operations in Tennessee's history. As I walked back toward the reunion, watching my family laugh and joke under the oak trees, I had no idea that this day would change everything between us forever. But first, I had to figure out how to excuse myself from the three-legged race without explaining that I needed to go secure a landing zone for the President of the United States. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I walked back toward the reunion, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. Code 7. Presidential landing. In Millbrook. The weight of the situation hit me like a freight train as I watched my cousin Jeremy demonstrate his golf swing to a captive audience of relatives. 4 hours. That's all the time I had to coordinate security for the most protected person on the planet, and I had to do it while pretending to care about Aunt Delilah's prize-winning potato salad recipe. My secure phone buzzed again with an encrypted message. "Advance Team ETA 90 minutes. Local PD being briefed now. Maintain cover until necessary." Director Harrison. Maintain cover, right. I glanced around at my family, still completely absorbed in their usual reunion activities. Uncle Garrett was holding court near the grills, telling anyone who'd listen about his latest business venture. Bethany was organizing some kind of group activity involving the kids, and my mother was helping set up more folding chairs as more relatives arrived. They had no idea that their sleepy little town was about to become the most secure airspace in America. "Roxy!" My sister's voice cut through my thoughts. "Come help us with the group photo. We want to get one before it gets too late." I forced a smile and walked over, but my trained eyes were already scanning the area differently now. The park had 3 main access points. The tree line provided decent cover, but also potential concealment for threats. The proximity to Millbrook Regional Airport, just 1.8 miles northeast, suddenly seemed much more significant than it had an hour ago. As Bethany arranged people for the photo, my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID, Millbrook Police Department. "Excuse me for just a second," I told the group, stepping away to answer. "Is this Agent Caldwell?" The voice was tense, official. "Speaking." "This is Chief Morrison, Millbrook PD." "Ma'am, I just got off the phone with some folks in Washington, and I have to say, this is the most unusual briefing I've ever received. They're telling me Air Force One is landing at our little airport in less than 4 hours?" I could hear the disbelief in his voice. Chief Morrison had been running Millbrook's 12-person police department for over 20 years. The most excitement they usually saw was the occasional DUI, or domestic disturbance. "That's correct, Chief. I know it seems impossible, but we need to treat this as a legitimate security operation. How many officers do you have available?" "All 12, but Agent Caldwell, our airport barely handles crop dusters and the occasional private plane. The runway's only 4,800 feet. The advance team will handle runway preparations. I need your officers to establish a perimeter around the airport and begin quietly evacuating any civilians from the immediate area. No media, no announcements. This stays completely confidential until further notice." "Ma'am, can I ask, how did you know to be here? I mean, what are the odds that a federal agent just happens to be in Millbrook during a presidential emergency landing?" I looked back at my family, still posing for photos, completely oblivious to the conversation happening 50 feet away. "I'm from here, Chief. This is my hometown. I'm at my family reunion." There was a long pause. "Your family doesn't know what you do they?" The question hit closer to home than I expected. "No, sir, they don't." "Well, ma'am, I suspect that's about to change." After ending the call, I stood there for a moment, watching my relatives laugh and joke around the photo setup. In 90 minutes, this entire area would be crawling with Secret Service agents, military personnel, and federal officials. The quiet family reunion would become ground zero for a presidential security operation. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from the Secret Service advance team. "Satellite imagery shows your location. Family gathering noted. Recommend gradual evacuation beginning in 60 minutes. Presidential detail requires 2-mile secure perimeter." 2-mile perimeter. That would encompass not just the park, but half of downtown Millbrook, including the diner where my Aunt Priscilla worked, the hardware store that Uncle Garrett's friend owned, and about 300 homes. "Roxanne," my mother's voice called out, "what's so important on that phone? You're missing the family photo." I walked back over, slipping the phone into my pocket. "Sorry, just work stuff." "Work?" Jeremy laughed. "What kind of emergency could possibly happen at a government office on a Saturday afternoon? Did someone misfile a form?" The laughter that followed felt different now. In less than 2 hours, these same people would watch as black SUVs surrounded the park, as men in dark suits with earpieces took positions around the perimeter, as military helicopters swept the area before the most recognizable aircraft in the world touched down at their local airport. "You know what I've never understood about your job, Roxy?" Uncle Garrett said, putting his arm around my shoulders for the photo. "What exactly do you do all day? I mean, specifically?" I smiled for the camera, knowing that this would be the last photo taken before everything changed. "Oh, you know," I said, the irony burning in my throat. "Just keeping America safe." The laughter that followed was warm and teasing. Uncle Garrett ruffled my hair like I was still 10 years old. Our little bureaucrat, keeping the world safe one memo at a time. As the camera clicked, capturing what would become a historic photograph, the last normal moment before a presidential security operation transformed their quiet town, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A man in a dark jacket was standing at the edge of the park, partially concealed behind a maintenance building. He was watching our group intently, and when he noticed me looking in his direction, he turned and walked quickly toward the parking lot. In my line of work, you learn to trust your instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. I stepped away from the group photo, pulling out my phone to text the advance team. Possible surveillance detected at reunion location. Male, 5 feet 10, dark jacket, now moving toward parking area. Recommend immediate security assessment. The response came back within seconds. Copy that. Advance team moving to your location now. Maintain visual if possible. I looked back at my family, still laughing and arranging themselves for more photos, completely unaware that their family reunion had just become a potential crime scene. This was really happening. In less than 4 hours, Air Force One would land in Millbrook, Tennessee, and somehow, I was right in the middle of it all. But first, I had to figure out who that man was, and why he'd been watching us. I watched the suspicious man disappear into the parking lot while my family continued their photo session, and suddenly I was transported back to a different family gathering 15 years ago. It was my college graduation party, right here in this same park, under these same oak trees. I had just finished my degree in international relations with a minor in criminology from Tennessee Tech, graduating summa cum laude with a 3.97 GPA. That day, I'd been bursting with excitement about my future, about the acceptance letter I'd received from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia. I couldn't wait to tell my family that I'd been selected for a prestigious program that would eventually lead to a career with a federal agency. I had dreams of making a real difference, of serving my country in ways that mattered. So what's next for our little scholar? Uncle Garrett had asked that day, the same patronizing tone he still used 15 years later. Thinking about getting a real job now? I remember how my chest had swelled with pride as I pulled out the acceptance letter. Actually, I've been accepted into a federal law enforcement training program. I'm going to work for the government, protecting national security. The silence that followed wasn't what I'd expected. It wasn't impressed silence or proud silence. It was the kind of silence that comes before disappointed laughter. Government work? My father, who was still alive then, had shaken his head slowly. Honey, government jobs are for people who can't make it in the real world. You're too smart for that. But Dad, this is different. It's federal law enforcement. It's important work. Roxy, my mother had interrupted gently, government employees are they're paper pushers. They sit in cubicles and process forms. Is that really what you want to do with your life? Bethany, who was 26 then and had just gotten married, chimed in with her usual blend of sisterly concern and superiority. I just think you're selling yourself short. Look at Jeremy. He's making 6 figures in pharmaceutical sales already. Or look at Priscilla with her catering business. They're building something. Government work is just safe. Even my beloved Grandpa Caldwell, who passed away 5 years ago, had looked concerned. Sugar, in my day people went into government work when they couldn't find anything else. Are you sure you've thought this through? I had tried to explain about the rigorous selection process, about the months of intensive training ahead of me, about the importance of the work I'd be doing, but the more I talked, the more skeptical they became. It's just that you're so bright, Roxy, Aunt Delilah had said, patting my hand like I was making a terrible mistake. We hate to see you waste that potential on a bureaucratic job where you'll never really achieve anything significant. That conversation had shaped the next 15 years of our relationship. When I completed my training at FLETC and was recruited by a specialized federal agency, I couldn't tell them the specifics due to security protocols. When I received commendations for my work, I couldn't share the details. When I was promoted to senior agent status, they just saw it as moving up in what they assumed was a mundane government hierarchy. The truth was, my career had been anything but mundane. After completing basic training, I'd been selected for specialized counterintelligence work. My first assignment involved infiltrating a domestic terrorist cell that was planning attacks on federal buildings. I spent 8 months undercover, gathering intelligence that ultimately prevented multiple bombings and led to the arrest of 17 conspirators. From there, I'd worked on cases involving foreign espionage, cyber threats to national infrastructure, and high-level security breaches. I'd traveled to 4 different countries on classified missions, testified before congressional subcommittees on matters of national security, and received personal commendations from 3 different agency directors. But I couldn't tell my family any of that. The nature of my work required absolute discretion, and the oath I'd taken meant that even my closest relatives couldn't know the truth about what I did for a living. So over the years, family gatherings became exercises in deflection and vague answers. When they asked about my work, I'd say things like, "just government stuff," or "nothing too exciting." When they asked why I wasn't married or didn't have children, I couldn't explain that my job required frequent travel on short notice, that maintaining relationships was nearly impossible when you couldn't talk about your work, that I'd turned down 3 different marriage proposals because the men couldn't understand why I was so secretive about my career. The irony was devastating. Here I was, working at the highest levels of national security, briefing senators and coordinating with international intelligence agencies, and my own family thought I was a failure who'd settled for a safe, meaningless job because I lacked ambition. The worst part was watching their disappointment grow over the years. At my 30-year birthday party, Uncle Garrett had pulled me aside and offered to help me find a real career through his business connections. At Christmas 3 years ago, Bethany had suggested I consider going back to school for an MBA so I could finally do something meaningful with my life. Even my mother, who loved me unconditionally, would sometimes get that worried look when she talked about my future. "I just want you to be happy, sweetheart," she'd say. "But don't you want more out of life? Don't you want to build something significant?" What they didn't understand was that I had built something significant. I'd built a career protecting the very freedoms they took for granted. I'd stopped threats they'd never hear about, prevented disasters they'd never know were coming, and served my country in ways that would never make the evening news. The hardest part was the loneliness, not just the professional isolation that came with classified work, but the personal isolation that came from being misunderstood by the people who mattered most to me. I'd sit at family dinners, listening to Jeremy brag about his sales numbers, or Bethany talk about her husband's construction projects, and I'd want so desperately to say, "Last month I helped prevent a cyber attack on the power grid that could have left millions without electricity." But I couldn't. The oath I'd taken, the security clearance I maintained, the lives that depended on operational secrecy, it all mattered more than my personal need for recognition. Instead, I'd smile and nod and let them think I spent my days filing paperwork in some forgotten corner of a federal building. I'd let them worry about my lack of ambition, my modest apartment, my single status, my apparent contentment with mediocrity. But sitting in this park 15 years after that graduation party, watching the same relatives who had questioned my choices prepare for a family photo, I realized that everything was about to change. In less than 3 hours, Air Force One would land at Millbrook Regional Airport, and my boring government job would suddenly take center stage in the most dramatic way possible. The man in the dark jacket was still out there somewhere, potentially threatening an operation I was now responsible for coordinating. My secure phone was buzzing with updates from agencies whose names my family had never heard of. And for the first time in 15 years, I was about to show them exactly what I'd built with my life. The foundation they'd worried was too weak was about to prove strong enough to protect the President of the United States. The turning point in my relationship with my family hadn't happened all at once. It was a slow erosion that began about 8 years ago, during what I now think of as the year everything went wrong. I was 36, finally hitting my stride professionally, when a series of events tested not just my career, but my entire sense of identity within the Caldwell family. It started with Dad's heart attack in March of that year. I was in the middle of a deep cover operation in Baltimore, investigating a cell of foreign agents who were attempting to infiltrate defense contractors. I'd been working the case for 4 months, had finally gained the trust of key targets, and was on the verge of a breakthrough that would expose an entire network of espionage activities. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Mom's voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Roxy, you need to come home. Your father, he's in the hospital. They don't know if he's going to make it." I stared at the ceiling of my cramped Baltimore apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mom, I'll be there as soon as I can. Let me just—" "How soon?" she interrupted, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "How soon can you get here?" That's when the weight of my choices hit me like a sledgehammer. I couldn't leave. Not immediately. The operation I was running was at a critical juncture. If I disappeared suddenly, it would blow my cover, compromise months of work, and potentially put other agents at risk. The foreign operatives I was tracking were planning something big, and I was the only person positioned to stop it. "Mom, I need to wrap up some things at work. I can probably be there by tomorrow evening." The silence on the other end of the line stretched forever. "Tomorrow evening?" Her voice was cold now, disappointed in a way that cut deeper than anger. "Your father might not make it through the night, and you need to wrap up things at work?" I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of the double life I'd chosen. "It's complicated, Mom. I can't just—" "What could possibly be so important that you can't drop everything for your father?" Everything, I wanted to scream. National security. Lives hanging in the balance. Operations that took months to set up and could save countless people. But instead, I said the only thing I could say: "I'm sorry. I'll get there as fast as possible." When I finally made it to Millbrook General Hospital 36 hours later, Dad was stable but weak. The family was gathered in the waiting room, and the atmosphere was tense. Bethany looked at me with barely concealed fury. 36 hours, Roxy. It took you 36 hours to show up for Dad's heart attack." "I came as soon as I could." "No," Jeremy interrupted, standing up from his chair. "You came as soon as it was convenient for your precious government job. What were you doing that was so important? Filing reports? Attending meetings?" Uncle Garrett shook his head slowly. "This is what happens when you prioritize a paycheck over family, Roxy. Government work makes people cold, disconnected from what really matters." I wanted to tell them that I'd spent those 36 hours dismantling a spy ring that could have compromised national defense secrets worth billions of dollars. I wanted to explain that 3 other federal agents were depending on me to maintain my cover until the operation was complete. I wanted them to understand that sometimes serving your country means making impossible choices between personal desires and national security. Instead, I sat in that hospital waiting room and let them think I was a selfish daughter who cared more about bureaucratic procedures than her own father's life. But the real damage came 6 months later, during what should have been a celebration. I'd just received the Director's Award for Distinguished Service, the highest honor my agency could bestow. It came with a significant promotion, a raise that doubled my salary, and recognition that would shape the rest of my career. I was 36 years old and had achieved something that most agents never reach. I wanted so desperately to share this with my family, to finally give them a glimpse of what I'd accomplished. So I drove down to Millbrook for Thanksgiving, hoping to find a way to hint at my success without violating security protocols. The conversation started innocently enough. We were sitting around Aunt Delilah's dining room table, sharing what we were thankful for. When it was my turn, I said, "I'm thankful for recognition at work. I recently received an important award for my contributions." "An award?" Bethany perked up slightly. "What kind of award?" I chose my words carefully. "It's a service award, for excellence in my field. It comes with a promotion and additional responsibilities." "Well, that's nice," Mom said, but her tone was polite rather than excited. "What kind of additional responsibilities?" This was where it got tricky. "How do you explain that you'd been promoted to senior special agent, in charge of counterintelligence operations, without actually saying those words? More oversight duties, more complex projects, some travel requirements." Uncle Garrett snorted. "Travel requirements? Let me guess. conferences in boring government cities where you'll sit in hotel meeting rooms and discuss policy changes? The laughter that followed felt like a knife in my chest. Here I was trying to share the biggest professional achievement of my life, and they were mocking it as meaningless bureaucratic advancement. Actually, the travel is for operational, I started, then caught myself. It's for important work. I'm sure it is, Jeremy said with obvious skepticism. Look, Roxy, we're not trying to hurt your feelings. It's just that we worry about you. You're in your mid-30s, living alone in D.C., working a job that apparently doesn't allow you to take time off when your father has a heart attack. Don't you want more out of life? What if something really important happens in the family? Bethany added. What if one of us needs you? Are you going to choose your government paperwork over us again? That question haunted me for years, because the honest answer was, maybe. If national security was at stake, if lives were on the line, if the safety of thousands of people depended on my actions, yes, I might have to choose my duty over my family's immediate needs. And that reality created a chasm between us that seemed to widen with every passing year. The worst part was watching their perception of me solidify into something I couldn't change. I became Roxy the government worker in their minds, dedicated to her boring job, probably afraid of taking risks, definitely lacking in ambition and family values. They started treating me like someone who needed career advice, relationship counseling, and gentle nudging toward a real life. At family gatherings, they'd suggest I meet their friends who worked in exciting fields like real estate or marketing. They'd share job openings they'd seen that might be more fulfilling than government work. They'd express concern about my settling for a safe but unrewarding career path. Each conversation felt like another layer of misunderstanding, another brick in the wall that separated who I really was from who they thought I was. I was protecting classified information that could save lives, working cases that would never make the news but were crucial to national security, and earning recognition from some of the most respected officials in federal law enforcement. But to my family, I was just Roxy, the unmarried government employee who couldn't even show up on time for a family emergency. The saddest part was that their concern came from love. They genuinely worried about my happiness, my future, my apparent lack of ambition. They wanted more from me because they cared about me, not because they wanted to hurt me. But their love felt like judgment, and their worry felt like disappointment, and after years of being unable to bridge that gap, I'd started to believe maybe they were right. Maybe I had chosen duty over family. Maybe I was missing out on the things that really mattered. Standing in this park now, knowing that Air Force One was less than 3 hours away from landing, I realized that all of those doubts were about to be answered in the most dramatic way possible. The moment that changed everything happened 2 years ago at Dad's funeral. It wasn't just losing him that broke something inside me. It was the conversation that happened afterward, the one that made me question whether I'd built my entire adult life on the wrong foundation. Dad had fought the effects of his heart attack for 6 years. He'd made lifestyle changes, followed doctor's orders religiously, and seemed to be doing well. We'd even joked at the previous year's reunion that he was healthier at 72 than he'd been at 60. But sometimes the damage catches up with you when you least expect it. The call came on a Thursday morning in October. I was in my office in Washington, reviewing intelligence reports on a potential cybersecurity threat, when Mom's number flashed on my screen. "Roxy," she said, and I knew immediately from her tone, "Your father collapsed at the hardware store this morning. The paramedics, they tried everything, but he didn't make it." This time, there was no operation to complete, no cover to maintain, no national security crisis that could take precedence over family. I was on a plane to Nashville within 2 hours, and driving through the familiar hills toward Millbrook by afternoon. The funeral was held at Millbrook Methodist, the same church where Dad had served as a deacon for over 30 years. The pews were packed with people whose lives he'd touched, customers from the insurance office where he'd worked, neighbors he'd helped through difficult times, friends from his weekly poker games. Person after person stood up to share stories about Robert Caldwell's kindness, his reliability, his quiet generosity. "Your father sold me my first life insurance policy when I was 22, said Mrs. Henderson, who lived 3 houses down from my childhood home. But when my husband died 5 years later, Bob didn't just process the claim. He showed up at my door with groceries, helped me understand the finances, and checked on me every week for months. That's the kind of man he was." Similar stories followed. Dad helping elderly clients navigate Medicare paperwork. Dad organizing charity drives for families hit by medical bills. Dad volunteering to teach financial literacy classes at the community center. Dad showing up with his toolbox whenever someone needed help with home repairs. As I sat in the front pew listening to these testimonials, I felt a profound sense of pride mixed with devastating sadness. My father had lived a life of quiet service, making a difference in his community one person at a time. He'd never received awards or recognition from government agencies, never worked on cases that made national headlines, never been trusted with classified information, but he'd built something meaningful and lasting right here in Millbrook. After the service, the family gathered at Mom's house for the traditional post-funeral meal. Aunt Delilah had organized the whole thing, as usual, and the kitchen was filled with casseroles and desserts brought by neighbors and friends. It should have been a time for sharing memories and supporting each other through grief. Instead, it became the moment when years of family tension finally exploded into the open. It started when Jeremy made an offhand comment about Dad's legacy. "He really built something special here in Millbrook," Jeremy said, helping himself to green bean casserole. "A real life, with real impact on real people. That's what matters." I should have let it go. I was grieving, exhausted, and emotionally raw. But something in his tone, the emphasis on real, felt like a deliberate dig at my career choices. "Dad was proud of all of us," I said quietly. "He understood that people serve in different ways." "Did he, though?" Bethany set down her plate and looked at me directly. "Because I remember him worrying about you constantly. Wondering why you'd chosen such an isolated life, why you couldn't even visit more than twice a year." "I visited as much as I could." "No, Roxy, you visited as much as your job allowed," Uncle Garrett interrupted. "There's a difference. Your father used to ask me if I thought you were happy, if I thought you'd made the right choices. He worried that you'd traded away everything meaningful for job security." The words hit me like physical blows. Dad never said that to me. "Of course he didn't," Mom said softly, tears streaming down her face. "He loved you. But, honey, he used to lie awake at night worrying about you, wondering if we'd failed you somehow, if we hadn't taught you the right values about family and community." I felt the room spinning. "What do you mean, the right values?" "He meant that work is supposed to support your life, not become your life," Bethany said. "Dad worked hard, but he was here for every birthday, every graduation, every family crisis. His job never kept him from showing up for the people he loved." "You think I don't show up?" My voice was getting louder, but I couldn't seem to control it. "You think I chose this career because I don't care about family?" "We think you chose a career that doesn't allow you to care about family the way you should," Jeremy said bluntly. "Look at the evidence, Roxy. Dad's heart attack. You were 36 hours late. His birthday last year, you had to leave early for some mysterious work emergency. Christmas 2 years ago, you couldn't come at all because of your job. When do we get to matter more than whatever bureaucratic crisis you're handling?" The unfairness of it was staggering. They had no idea what I'd sacrificed to serve my country, what I'd given up to keep them safe. The Christmas I'd missed was because I was working to prevent a terrorist attack on a major transportation hub. The birthday I'd left early was because intelligence had come in about a foreign agent trying to recruit assets inside the State Department. The mysterious work emergencies were threats to national security that could have affected millions of lives. But I couldn't say any of that. The oath I'd taken, the security clearance I maintained, the lives that depended on operational secrecy. It all meant that I had to sit there and let them think I prioritized paperwork over people. "You don't understand," I said weakly. "Then help us understand," Mom pleaded. "Tell us what's so important about this job that it's worth sacrificing relationships for. What do you actually do that's so crucial it can't wait for family?" I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. How could I explain without betraying everything I'd sworn to protect? How could I make them understand that my absence wasn't about indifference, but about dedication to something larger than myself? "I keep America safe," I said finally, the words sounding hollow even to me. The silence that followed was worse than their criticism had been. "Sweetheart," Aunt Delilah said gently, "we all like to think our jobs matter, but at the end of the day, what really matters is the people who love you. Your father knew that. He built a life here, with us, making a real difference in ways he could see and touch. That's what he wanted for you too." That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and wondering if they were right. Maybe I had chosen wrong. Maybe the meaningful life was the one Dad had lived, rooted in community, present for family, making a visible difference in the lives of people he knew and loved. Maybe my career, for all its importance and secrecy, was just an elaborate way of avoiding the messy, complicated work of being truly present for the people who mattered most. I flew back to Washington the next day carrying a weight I'd never felt before. Not just grief for my father, but a devastating uncertainty about the path I'd chosen. Had I spent 15 years convincing myself that my work mattered, while slowly losing the relationships that actually gave life meaning? For months afterward, I threw myself even deeper into my cases, as if professional achievement could fill the void that family doubt had opened. I worked longer hours, took on more complex assignments, earned additional commendations. But none of it felt like enough to justify what I'd apparently sacrificed. The question that haunted me was simple but devastating. If your own family can't understand the value of what you do, if the people who love you most think you've wasted your life, then what does any of it actually mean? Standing in this park now, watching the same relatives who had questioned my choices at Dad's funeral, I realized that in less than 2 hours, that question was about to be answered definitively. Standing in that park, watching my family laugh and joke while a potential security threat loomed just beyond the tree line, I felt something shift inside me. For 2 years since Dad's funeral, I'd carried their words like stones in my chest. Their doubts had become my doubts. Their questions about my choices had become my own sleepless nights, wondering if I'd wasted my life on work that nobody understood or appreciated. But now, with Air Force One less than 2 hours away from landing in Millbrook, I realized something profound. This wasn't about proving anything to my family anymore. This was about doing what I'd trained my entire adult life to do. This was about the oath I'd taken, the people I'd sworn to protect, and the skills I'd developed over 15 years of service. The man in the dark jacket was still out there somewhere. My secure phone was buzzing with updates from agencies coordinating the most complex security operation in Tennessee's history. And I was the only federal agent on the ground in a situation that could affect the safety of the President of the United States. My family could question my career choices later. Right now, I had work to do. I pulled out my phone and stepped away from the group, walking toward the edge of the park where I could speak privately. The text from the advance team was waiting. "Surveillance subject has disappeared. Need you to coordinate with local assets while we establish perimeter. Time is critical." I typed back quickly, "Copy that. Coordinating now. What's our current threat assessment?" The response came immediately, "Unknown." Subject was photographing your location before leaving. Could be reconnaissance for larger operation. Assume hostile until proven otherwise. Photographing our location. My blood ran cold as I looked back at my family, still gathered around the dessert table, completely vulnerable and unaware. Uncle Garrett was telling one of his long-winded stories, gesturing with his hands, while Aunt Delilah refilled sweet tea glasses. The kids were running around playing tag, their laughter carrying across the park. They had no idea they might be in danger. Another message appeared on my screen. Presidential detail requesting immediate area lockdown. All civilians must be evacuated from 2-mile radius within 90 minutes. Local PD standing by for your orders. 90 minutes. I looked at my watch. 3:47 p.m. Air Force One was scheduled to land at 6:15 p.m., which meant the security perimeter needed to be in place by 5 p.m. at the latest. In exactly 73 minutes, this entire area would need to be cleared of civilians, secured by federal agents, and transformed into the most protected airspace in America. And I was going to have to figure out how to evacuate my own family reunion without causing mass panic or revealing classified information. My phone rang. It was Director Harrison. Agent Caldwell, what's your current status? Sir, I'm still at the family gathering. The suspicious individual has disappeared, but I'm coordinating with local law enforcement to establish the security perimeter. Roxanne, his voice was unusually personal, using my first name instead of my title. I need you to understand something. This operation is bigger than we initially thought. We have credible intelligence suggesting that foreign operatives have been tracking the president's movements for weeks. Today's emergency landing in Millbrook might not be the coincidence we thought it was. I felt my stomach drop. Sir, are you saying this was planned? That someone deliberately forced Air Force One to land here? We're investigating that possibility. What I'm saying is that the threat level has been elevated to Code Red. We need that area cleared and secured immediately, and we need you to identify anyone who doesn't belong. Code Red. In 15 years with the agency, I'd never worked a Code Red operation. It meant imminent threat to the president's life. All protocols suspended, maximum force authorized. Understood, sir. I'll coordinate the evacuation now. And Roxanne, your family doesn't know what you do for a living, correct? That's correct, sir. They're about to find out. Are you prepared for that? I looked back at my relatives, still laughing and chatting under the oak trees, the same people who'd spent years worrying about my meaningless government job and questioning my life choices. Yes, sir, I'm prepared. After ending the call, I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of 15 years of secrecy lifting from my shoulders. In 70 minutes, black SUVs would surround this park. Federal agents with tactical gear would establish a perimeter. Military helicopters would sweep the area. And the same family members who'd mocked my boring bureaucratic job would watch me coordinate one of the highest-level security operations in the state's history. But first, I had to keep them safe. I walked back toward the group, my mind racing through evacuation protocols. The challenge wasn't just getting them to leave. It was getting them to leave quickly and quietly without creating the kind of disturbance that might alert potential threats in the area. Hey everyone, I called out, trying to keep my voice casual. I just got a call from my office. There's been some kind of emergency, and they need all civilians to clear out of this area for safety reasons. The response was immediate and predictably skeptical. What kind of emergency? Jeremy asked, looking annoyed. We just got everything set up. It's hard to explain, I said, which was both true and completely inadequate. But it's serious. We need to pack up and head home within the next hour. Uncle Garrett shook his head dismissively. Roxy, honey, what kind of government emergency could possibly affect a family reunion in Millbrook, Tennessee? Did someone misfile a tax return? The laughter that followed felt different now. Not cruel, exactly, but ignorant in a way that made me realize how much they were about to learn about the world they'd never imagined I operated in. It's not a tax issue, I said firmly. It's a security matter, and I need you to trust me on this. Security matter? Bethany looked confused. What would you know about security matters? You work in some kind of administrative office, don't you? I felt my phone buzzing with another urgent message, but I couldn't check it without drawing more attention. Every second we delayed was a second closer to the lockdown, and I could see in their faces that they weren't taking me seriously. That's when I made the decision that would change everything between us forever. Actually, I said, pulling out my federal credentials for the first time in 15 years of family gatherings, I don't work in an administrative office. I'm a senior special agent with a federal law enforcement agency, and what I'm telling you isn't a request, it's an official order. The silence that followed was absolute. Uncle Garrett's mouth fell open. Jeremy stared at the badge and ID card like he'd never seen anything like them before. Bethany actually took a step backward. "What the hell?" Uncle Garrett whispered. Mom was the first to find her voice. "Roxy, what is this? What are you talking about?" I looked around at their shocked faces, knowing that there was no going back from this moment. The secret I'd kept for 15 years was out, and everything was about to change. "Mom, I'm a federal agent. I have been for 15 years. And right now, I need you to pack up this reunion and get everyone away from here, because in exactly 68 minutes, this area is going to become the most secure location in Tennessee." "Why?" Bethany's voice was barely audible. I checked my phone. The message waiting for me was from the presidential detail, Air Force One on final approach. ETA now 6:10 p.m. Perimeter must be established immediately. I looked at my family, really looked at them, and realized that after 15 years of hiding who I was finally about to show them what I'd built with my life. "Because," I said, "Air Force One is landing at Millbrook Regional Airport in less than 2 hours, and I'm the agent in charge of keeping the President of the United States alive." The stunned silence stretched for exactly 4 seconds before chaos erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Uncle Garrett demanding to know if this was some kind of joke, Bethany asking why I'd never told them, Mom reaching for my arm like she needed to steady herself. But I didn't have time for explanations or emotional processing. My secure phone was buzzing with incoming intelligence updates, and I could see 3 black SUVs turning into the park's main entrance. "Listen to me," I said, raising my voice above their questions. "I know this is a shock, but we have a situation developing. I need everyone to gather their belongings and move to the parking lot immediately. No arguments, no delays." "Roxy, wait," Mom's voice was shaking. "The president. You're serious about this?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Chief Morrison. "Agent Caldwell, we've got a problem. My officers just found the subject you described, the man in the dark jacket. He's holed up in an abandoned warehouse about half a mile from the airport. And he's not alone." My blood turned to ice. "How many?" "At least 3, possibly 4 individuals. They've got surveillance equipment, radio gear, and what looks like long-range photography equipment. My boys are maintaining distance, but Agent Caldwell, this looks organized." I glanced at my family, who were all staring at me with expressions ranging from confusion to fear. The kids had stopped playing and were clustering around the adults, sensing the tension. "Chief, I need you to maintain your perimeter but do not engage. Federal backup is en route. How's the airport evacuation going?" "That's the other problem. We've got about 24 private aircraft that need to be moved, and the tower's having issues with their communication system. Could be coincidence, could be sabotage. Communication system failure at the same time suspicious individuals set up surveillance near the airport. In my line of work, there were no coincidences. Chief, treat it as sabotage until proven otherwise. I'll coordinate with the advance team and be at your location within 15 minutes. As I hung up, I realized my family had heard every word of the conversation. Uncle Garrett was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Surveillance equipment? Sabotage? Roxy, what the hell kind of work do you actually do?" "The kind that keeps people like you safe," I said, pulling up the contact for the Secret Service advance team. "Look, I'll explain everything later, But right now, I need you to follow the evacuation procedures. Those SUVs coming toward us? Those are federal agents who work with me." Jeremy pointed toward the black vehicles, his face pale. "Those are for you?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know who you are, Agent Caldwell. Tell your family goodbye." The blood drained from my face. They knew my name. They knew I was here. And they were threatening my family. I immediately forwarded the message to Director Harrison and the advance team, then turned to face my relatives with a level of urgency they'd never seen from me before. "Everyone needs to move to the cars right now. This isn't a drill, this isn't a precaution, and this isn't negotiable." But even as I spoke, I was scanning the tree line around the park, looking for any sign of movement or surveillance. The fact that they knew my identity meant they'd been watching us for longer than we'd realized. How long? Since I arrived? Since yesterday? How much did they know about my family? The lead SUV pulled up, and Agent Martinez stepped out. I'd worked with him on 3 previous operations, and his presence meant this was being treated as a top-tier threat. "Agent Caldwell," he called out, jogging over to where we stood, "we need to move your civilians immediately. Intelligence suggests this location has been compromised." Uncle Garrett's mouth fell open. "Civilians? Did he just call us civilians? Are these your family members?" Martinez asked, his eyes already assessing escape routes and potential threats. "Yes, they're cooperating with evacuation procedures." Martinez nodded, then spoke into his radio. "Base, this is Martinez. We have the agent's family secured and ready for transport. Requesting escort vehicles for civilian evacuation." "Transport?" Bethany's voice pitched higher. "Escort vehicles? Roxy, what is going on?" Agent Martinez looked at me questioningly. "Ma'am, how much do they know about your operational status?" "They just found out I'm a federal agent about 3 minutes ago." His eyebrows shot up. 3 minutes ago, and we're dealing with a code red situation? "It's complicated," I said, which seemed to be my standard response when my 2 worlds collided. My phone rang again. Director Harrison. "Roxanne, we've intercepted additional communications. The group at the warehouse isn't just conducting surveillance. They're planning an active operation against Air Force One during landing. We're moving the president's ETA up by 20 minutes. You need to clear that area now." 20 minutes earlier. That meant Air Force One would be landing at 5:50 p.m. instead of 6:10 p.m. I checked my watch. 4:23 p.m. We had 87 minutes to completely secure a 2-mile radius, neutralize an active threat, and coordinate the most complex presidential security operation in Tennessee history. "Understood, sir. What's our intelligence on the threat team?" 4 confirmed hostiles, possibly foreign operatives. They have tactical equipment and appear to be coordinating with an outside source. "Roxanne, this looks like a planned assassination attempt." The word assassination hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just surveillance or intelligence gathering. Someone was actively planning to kill the President of the United States, and they were doing it in my hometown while my family was nearby. "Sir, I need immediate backup at my location. The suspects know my identity and have made direct threats against my family." "Already in motion. You'll have a full tactical team within 10 minutes. But Roxanne, I need you to coordinate the airport security until they arrive. You're our only asset on the ground with knowledge of the local area." I looked at my family, who were listening to every word with growing alarm. Mom had gone completely white. Bethany was clutching Wade's arm like she might fall down. Uncle Garrett was just staring at me like I'd transformed into a completely different person. Which, in a way, I had. "Agent Caldwell," Martinez interrupted, "we need to move these civilians to a secure location immediately. If the suspects know your identity, your family could be targets." Targets. My family could be targets because of who I was, because of the work I'd chosen, because of the oath I'd taken 15 years ago to protect national security. The irony was devastating. The same people who'd questioned whether my career had any real value were now in danger because of how valuable that career actually was. "Where can we take them?" I asked Martinez. "There's a secure facility about 15 miles from here. Full protection, communication blackout, the works." "Communication blackout?" Jeremy looked panicked. "For how long?" "Until the operation is complete," I said. "Look, I know this is terrifying and confusing, but I need you to trust me. These agents are going to take you somewhere safe while I handle the situation here." "Handle the situation?" Uncle Garrett found his voice again. "Roxy, you're talking about assassination attempts and tactical teams. What situation could you possibly be qualified to handle?" Before I could answer, 2 more SUVs pulled into the park, followed by what looked like a mobile command center. Men and women in tactical gear began pouring out of the vehicles, setting up equipment and establishing a perimeter with military precision. Agent Martinez spoke into his radio again. "Base, we have the package's family ready for immediate transport, requesting authorization to move to secure location Delta." Package. In federal law enforcement terminology, the quota package was the person being protected. In this case, that was me. My family wasn't just being evacuated. They were being placed in protective custody because I was a federal agent involved in a presidential security operation. I watched their faces as the full scope of the situation sank in. These weren't just random government workers. This wasn't bureaucratic procedure. This was a full-scale federal operation with tactical teams, secure facilities, and protocols they'd never imagined existed. And I was at the center of it all. "Roxy," Mom's voice was barely a whisper, "who are you?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. 46 minutes until showtime. Your family makes beautiful targets." This time, they'd included a photo. It was taken from the tree line, showing all of us gathered around the dessert table just 20 minutes earlier. In the photo, red circles had been drawn around each family member's face. The investigation phase was over. Now this was war. Staring at the photo with red circles around my family's faces, my mind immediately jumped to the most obvious explanation. This was a foreign intelligence operation targeting the president's unscheduled landing, and my family had become collateral damage because I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was bad luck, terrible timing, but ultimately a straightforward scenario that we could handle with standard protocols. "Agent Martinez," I said, showing him the threatening message. "This confirms foreign operatives with advanced intelligence capabilities. They've been surveilling this location and identified me as the local federal asset. Standard intimidation tactics to compromise operational effectiveness." Martinez studied the photo and nodded grimly. "Fits the profile. Foreign agents attempting to eliminate local law enforcement coordination before the main operation. We've seen this pattern in Eastern European assassination attempts." That made sense. It was logical, strategic, and exactly the kind of operation I'd trained to handle. Foreign agents had somehow learned about the president's emergency landing, positioned surveillance teams around the airport, and were now trying to neutralize me because I was the only federal agent on the ground who could coordinate local security. My phone rang with another update from Director Harrison. "Roxanne, we've identified the suspects. Intelligence suggests they're part of a network we've been tracking for 8 months, foreign operatives specializing in high-value target elimination. They've been monitoring air traffic patterns and had advance warning of potential emergency landing sites." "Sir, that confirms my assessment. They're targeting me to eliminate local coordination capabilities before the president arrives." "Exactly. We're treating this as a standard foreign assassination plot with local agent compromise. Your family is collateral. They're threatening them to distract you from your operational duties." I felt a grim satisfaction that my analysis was correct. This was textbook international espionage tactics. Threaten the local agent's family to create emotional compromise, eliminate local coordination, then execute the primary mission against the target. I'd studied dozens of similar operations during my training. Agent Martinez was already coordinating the response. We'll move your family to secure location Delta while you coordinate airport security. Standard protocol for family member protection during international threat operations. How long until backup arrives, I asked. Full tactical team ETA 12 minutes. Counter-surveillance unit is already moving to neutralize the warehouse location. We should have the foreign operatives in custody within the hour. Everything was proceeding according to established protocols. This was exactly the kind of situation I'd trained for. Foreign agents, presidential security, family member protection. Complex, high stakes, but ultimately manageable with proper resources and coordination. Uncle Garrett was still staring at the tactical teams setting up around the park. So these are foreign spies? Like actual spies trying to hurt the president? That's what the intelligence indicates, I replied, feeling confident in the assessment. It's a coordinated international operation, but we have procedures for this. Jeremy looked almost impressed despite his fear. Jesus, Roxy, you really do work on serious stuff. Mom grabbed my arm. But you've handled things like this before, right? You know what you're doing? I've been trained for exactly this scenario, I assured her. Foreign operatives, presidential security, family member protection, it's all standard procedure. The tactical team will neutralize the immediate threat while I coordinate local security for the president's landing. Bethany was helping organize the kids for evacuation. How often does this kind of thing happen? More often than people realize, I said. Foreign governments regularly attempt intelligence operations on U.S. soil. Most of them are intercepted before they become active threats. This one just happened to coincide with an emergency presidential landing. Agent Martinez received an update through his earpiece and turned to me. Counter-surveillance has eyes on the warehouse. 4 suspects confirmed, sophisticated equipment, definitely foreign operatives based on communication intercepts. We're moving to surround them now. I nodded, feeling the familiar rhythm of a complex operation falling into place. What's the timeline for neutralization? 30 minutes maximum. Once we have them in custody, we can determine if there are additional cells in the area. My secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from intelligence analysis. Preliminary assessment confirms foreign operative network. Communication patterns match known international assassination protocols. Recommends standard counterintelligence response. Everything was adding up perfectly. The threats against my family were psychological warfare designed to compromise my effectiveness. The surveillance equipment at the warehouse was for intelligence gathering on presidential security measures. The communication system sabotage at the airport was to create confusion during the landing operation. It was sophisticated, well-coordinated, and exactly the kind of international plot that agencies like mine existed to prevent. Agent Caldwell, Martinez said, "We're ready to transport your family to the secure location. Once they're safe, you can focus entirely on coordinating airport security without worrying about their safety." I looked at my relatives, who were finally beginning to understand the scope of what I dealt with in my daily work. Uncle Garrett wasn't making jokes about government paperwork anymore. Jeremy wasn't questioning the importance of federal employment. Bethany had stopped suggesting I needed to find more meaningful work. "Before you go," I said to them, "I want you to understand something. This is what I do. This is what I've been doing for 15 years. Protecting people from threats they never see coming, handling crises they never hear about, serving the country in ways that have to stay secret." Mom's eyes were filled with tears, but also with something I'd never seen before, pride mixed with understanding. "Honey, why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because I couldn't," I said simply. "The nature of the work requires absolute secrecy. But now you know. This is what my boring government job actually looks like." Agent Martinez checked his watch. "Ma'am, we need to move your family now. The tactical team is in position, and we're ready to begin the warehouse operation." As federal agents began escorting my family toward the secure transport vehicles, Uncle Garrett stopped and looked back at me. "Roxy, I owe you an apology. We had no idea." "There's nothing to apologize for," I said. "You couldn't have known." But as I watched them disappear into the black SUVs, something nagged at the back of my mind. Something about the timing, about the precision of the intelligence the operatives seemed to have about my location, about how perfectly everything fit the textbook foreign assassination scenario. In 15 years of federal service, I'd learned that when something seemed too perfect, too logical, too exactly what you'd expect, that's when you needed to start asking different questions. My phone rang with another update from Director Harrison. "Roxanne, we're moving to neutralize the warehouse threat now. Once that's secure, you'll coordinate airport security for the president's arrival. Standard operation from here." "Understood, sir," I replied. But as I watched the tactical teams prepare for their assault on the warehouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. Something that would make this whole situation much more complicated than a straightforward foreign intelligence operation. I just didn't know what it was yet. 23 minutes later, everything went wrong. I was standing in the mobile command center that had been set up at the edge of Riverside Park, coordinating final security preparations for Air Force One's landing, when Agent Martinez's voice crackled through the radio with the kind of tension that makes your blood freeze. "Command, this is Tactical Team Leader. We have a problem at the warehouse location." Director Harrison's voice came through my secure line simultaneously. "Roxanne, are you monitoring the warehouse operation?" "Yes, sir. What's the situation?" "The tactical team just breached the building. It's empty, completely empty, no suspects, no equipment, no evidence that anyone was ever there." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "That's impossible. Chief Morrison's officers had eyes on the location 30 minutes ago." "I know, but there's more. The communication equipment they reported seeing? It was never there. We've reviewed the area with thermal imaging, electronic surveillance, everything. The warehouse has been abandoned for months." Agent Martinez's voice came through the radio again. "Command, we've interviewed Chief Morrison's officers. They're claiming they never reported suspicious activity at any warehouse. They say they've been patrolling normally and haven't seen anything unusual." The mobile command center went silent, except for the hum of electronic equipment. I stared at the communication board, trying to process what I was hearing. "Agent Martinez, that's not possible. I spoke directly with Chief Morrison less than an hour ago. He told me his officers had identified the suspects." "Ma'am, I'm standing next to Chief Morrison right now. He says he hasn't spoken to you today at all. He says the last time he talked to you was 6 months ago when you were here for your father's memorial service." The world tilted sideways. 6 months ago, Dad's memorial service. That was true. I had spoken with Chief Morrison then, briefly, when he'd offered condolences and mentioned how proud the community was of me, even though they didn't know exactly what I did for work. But the phone call about the warehouse, about the suspects, about the communication system sabotage, that conversation had definitely happened. I remembered every word of it. "Director Harrison," I said, my voice carefully controlled, "I need you to verify something for me. Did Chief Morrison contact our agency today about suspicious activity?" "Negative. We have no record of communication from Millbrook Police Department today. In fact, our liaison checked with them an hour ago, and they reported no unusual activity in the area at all." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my call history. There it was, a call at 4:15 p.m. from a number labeled Millbrook Police Department that had lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. "Sir, I have a logged call from Millbrook PD at 4:15 p.m., 4.5 minutes of conversation with Chief Morrison about suspects at a warehouse. Agent Caldwell, let me be very clear. Chief Morrison is standing right next to Agent Martinez at this moment. They've checked the department's call logs. No outgoing calls were made to your number today. No calls were made to any federal agencies today." The implications hit me like a freight train. If Chief Morrison hadn't called me, then who had? If there were no suspects at the warehouse, then who was sending the threatening text messages? If the entire scenario I'd been responding to for the past hour was fabricated, then what the hell was actually happening? "Agent Martinez," I said into the radio, "I need you to verify something for me immediately. Contact the tower at Millbrook Regional Airport and confirm the status of their communication systems." "Copy that, Agent Caldwell." While I waited for the response, I scrolled through my phone to find the threatening text messages. The unknown number that had sent the photo of my family, the messages about showtime and making beautiful targets, I needed to trace those immediately. But when I opened my message history, the texts weren't there. The conversation thread from the unknown number had completely disappeared from my phone. "That's not possible," I whispered, scrolling frantically through every conversation thread. The messages had been there 20 minutes ago. I'd shown them to Agent Martinez. I'd forwarded them to Director Harrison and the advance team. I called up my sent messages folder. No forwarded text to the director. No forwarded messages to the advance team. According to my phone's history, I'd never received threatening messages from anyone today. Agent Martinez's voice came back through the radio. "Command, I've spoken with Millbrook Regional Airport. Their communication systems are functioning normally. No sabotage, no malfunctions, no issues reported today at all. The mobile command center felt like it was closing in around me. Every piece of evidence I'd based the last hour of operations on was evaporating. The suspects didn't exist. The phone calls hadn't happened. The threatening messages had vanished. The communication sabotage was fictional. But Air Force One was still coming. The president was still landing in 43 minutes. And I was coordinating security for a threat scenario that apparently existed only in my imagination. "Director Harrison," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Do you have any independent confirmation of threats against this operation?" The pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know. "Roxanne, the only threat intelligence we have is what you've reported to us. The code red designation, the foreign operative assessment, the family targeting. All of that came from your situation reports over the past hour." I sank into a chair, the weight of realization crushing down on me. Everything I'd reported to the agency, the warehouse surveillance, the communications sabotage, the threatening messages, had originated from sources that apparently didn't exist. "Sir, are you telling me that the entire threat scenario is based solely on my reports?" "That's correct. We elevated the security posture because we trust your judgment and experience. You've never provided inaccurate intelligence before. We had no reason to doubt your assessment." Agent Martinez's voice cut through the radio static. "Agent Caldwell, we need to address something else. Your family's transport to the secure location. They're asking why they're being moved for a threat that doesn't seem to exist." My family. I'd put my own relatives into protective custody, surrounded them with federal agents, and traumatized them with talk of assassination plots and foreign operatives, all based on intelligence that had somehow fabricated itself in my mind. "Agent Martinez, what's your assessment of my mental state over the past hour?" Another pause. "Ma'am, you've been professional and competent throughout this operation. Your responses have been appropriate for the threat level you described. But if that threat level was based on inaccurate intelligence," he didn't need to finish the sentence. "If I'd imagined or hallucinated the entire scenario, then I'd just compromised a presidential security operation based on my own psychological breakdown." But the phone calls had been real. I'd heard Chief Morrison's voice. I'd seen the threatening text messages. I'd received multiple updates from sources that seemed legitimate and verifiable. "Director Harrison," I said, "I need immediate psychological evaluation protocols and a complete investigation of all communication sources I've interacted with today. Either I'm experiencing some kind of breakdown, or someone has orchestrated an extremely sophisticated deception operation." Agreed. "But Roxanne, we have a bigger problem. Air Force One is 39 minutes out, and we've deployed massive federal resources based on threat intelligence that may not exist. If this is a false alarm, we need to know immediately." I looked around the mobile command center at the dozens of federal agents who had responded to my reports. Tactical teams, communications specialists, counterintelligence operatives, all deployed because I'd convinced my superiors that we were facing a coordinated assassination attempt. Either I was losing my mind, or someone had manipulated me so skillfully that I'd become an unwitting weapon against my own operation. "Sir, recommend we proceed with full security protocols while investigating the source of the intelligence discrepancies. Better to over-respond to a false threat than under-respond to a real one." "Agreed. But Agent Caldwell, if this turns out to be a psychological episode, it will end your career. You understand that, right?" I understood. In 39 minutes, when Air Force One landed safely and no threats materialized, I would have to explain how a senior federal agent with 15 years of experience had hallucinated an entire assassination plot. Unless I could figure out what had really happened to me in the past hour, and I was running out of time to find the truth. 37 minutes until Air Force One landed, and I was staring at my phone, desperately trying to understand what had happened to me, when Agent Martinez walked into the command center with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s wearing a simple business suit and carrying a tablet. "Agent Caldwell," Martinez said, "this is Dr. Sarah Chen from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Behavioral Analysis Unit. She's been reviewing your situation." Dr. Chen stepped forward with the kind of calm confidence that made me immediately suspicious. "Agent Caldwell, I need to ask you some very specific questions about your experiences today. But first, I want you to know that you're not having a psychological breakdown." The relief that flooded through me was so intense I nearly collapsed. "Dr. Chen, I don't understand what happened. The phone calls were real, the text messages existed, but now there's no evidence of any of it." "That's because you were the target of what we call a, quote, cognitive infiltration operation," she said, consulting her tablet. "Someone has been manipulating your perceptions using advanced psychological warfare techniques combined with sophisticated technology." "What do you mean?" Dr. Chen sat down across from me. "Agent Caldwell, 3 days ago our cybersecurity division detected unusual activity on several federal communication networks. Someone had gained access to highly classified information about presidential travel protocols, agent personal information, and family background data." My blood went cold. "How much information?" "Everything. Your service record, your family relationships, your psychological profile, your communication patterns, even your personal cell phone and secure device identifiers." She paused, studying my reaction. "Whoever did this knew exactly how you would respond to specific types of threats." Agent Martinez leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, are you saying someone orchestrated this entire scenario?" "Not orchestrated, weaponized. They used Agent Caldwell's own training and instincts against her." Dr. Chen turned back to me. "Tell me about the phone call from Chief Morrison. What did his voice sound like?" I closed my eyes, trying to remember. It sounded exactly like him. Same accent, same speech patterns, even the same way he clears his throat when he's nervous. That's because it was a synthetic voice replication created from audio samples of Chief Morrison's actual speech. The technology exists to create perfect voice clones from just a few minutes of recorded conversation. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. The memorial service. 6 months ago, when I spoke with Chief Morrison, someone recorded that conversation? Not just recorded it. They've been collecting audio samples of everyone in your personal and professional life for months, possibly years. Dr. Chen scrolled through her tablet. "The threatening text messages you received? They were delivered using a technique called phantom messaging. Texts that appear on your device but aren't actually sent through normal cellular networks. They can be remotely deleted without leaving traces in your phone's memory." Agent Martinez shook his head. "But why? What's the purpose of making Agent Caldwell think there's a threat when there isn't one? Dr. Chen looked directly at me. Agent Caldwell, who authorized the current security response, who made the decision to deploy tactical teams, establish perimeters, and coordinate with local law enforcement. I did, I said quietly, based on the intelligence I reported. Exactly. You've been manipulated into creating the largest federal security presence in this area's history. Dozens of agents, tactical teams, electronic surveillance equipment, communication networks, all concentrated in one location based on your reports. The pieces started falling into place with terrifying clarity. They wanted federal resources concentrated here. But why? Dr. Chen's expression grew grave. Because while you've been responding to a fabricated threat in Millbrook, the real operation is happening somewhere else entirely. She turned her tablet toward me, showing a map of Tennessee with 2 locations marked in red. 47 minutes ago, while every available federal asset was being deployed to your location, a coordinated attack began on a federal courthouse in Nashville, where a major terrorism trial was scheduled to begin Monday morning. The courthouse was left with minimal security because all backup resources had been diverted here. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. How many casualties? None yet, but the attackers have taken 12 federal employees hostage, including 2 federal judges. They're demanding the release of 3 high-value terrorism suspects currently in federal custody. Agent Martinez was already on his radio, calling for immediate redeployment. But Dr. Chen held up her hand. Agent Martinez, we can't simply abandon this location. That's exactly what they want us to do. I don't understand, I said. Dr. Chen pulled up another screen on her tablet. Air Force One isn't making an emergency landing because of weather, Agent Caldwell. The president's flight path was altered because we received credible intelligence about a surface-to-air missile threat along the original route. My mind reeled. So the presidential landing is real? Completely real. But here's what we believe happened. The same people who orchestrated the Nashville courthouse attack also planted intelligence about the missile threat, knowing it would force Air Force One to divert to Millbrook, the only airport in the region capable of handling a presidential landing. The full scope of their plan crystallized in my mind. They wanted the president here. They manipulated federal intelligence to force Air Force One to land in Millbrook. Then they manipulated me into concentrating all security resources in this location. Exactly. But they made one critical error, Dr. Chen said. They assumed that overwhelming you with false intelligence would compromise your effectiveness as the local security coordinator. Instead, your response was so thorough and professional that you've inadvertently created the most secure presidential landing zone in recent history. Agent Martinez looked confused. So Agent Caldwell actually helped prevent an assassination attempt by responding to fabricated threats? That's our assessment. The real plan was probably to eliminate her as a security factor through psychological manipulation, then exploit the reduced security presence during the presidential landing. Instead, her response brought more federal resources to Millbrook than have ever been deployed for a single operation in Tennessee. I stared at Dr. Chen, trying to process everything. But the Nashville courthouse is being handled by specialized hostage rescue teams. The situation is contained, and negotiations are ongoing. But Agent Caldwell, we need you to focus on the immediate priority. Air Force One lands in 31 minutes, and we now know this location was specifically chosen by hostile forces as their primary target. The irony was overwhelming. I'd spent the past hour thinking I was having a breakdown, questioning my sanity and my career, while actually responding perfectly to the most sophisticated psychological warfare operation I'd ever encountered. Dr. Chen, do we know who's behind this? We're still investigating, but the level of sophistication suggests state-sponsored actors with extensive intelligence capabilities and months of preparation time. She stood up, closing her tablet. The important thing is that you recognize something was wrong. Your instincts were correct. The scenario was too perfect, too textbook. That's what led us to investigate the source of the intelligence. Agent Martinez was coordinating security updates through his radio. Agent Caldwell, we have confirmation that Air Force One is 28 minutes out. All security protocols remain in effect, but now we know we're protecting against a real threat. I looked around the mobile command center at the dozens of federal agents who had responded to my reports. They weren't here because I'd imagined a threat. They were here because someone had manipulated me into creating the exact security response needed to protect the president from a real assassination attempt. Dr. Chen, I said, my family, they think I've been lying to them for 15 years about what I do for work. She smiled slightly. Agent Caldwell, in the next 28 minutes, they're going to see exactly what you do for work, and I think they're going to be very proud of who you really are. For the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe. The threat was real, but so was my ability to handle it. And my family was about to discover that their concerns about my meaningless government job had been as fabricated as the intelligence that had brought us all here. 26 minutes until Air Force One touched down, and I was finally ready to coordinate the operation I'd unknowingly been preparing for all my life. But first, Dr. Chen had one more revelation that would change everything I understood about my career, my family, and the choices I'd made over the past 15 years. Agent Caldwell, she said, pulling up a classified file on her tablet, there's something else you need to know about why you were targeted for this operation. The people behind this attack didn't choose you randomly. They've been studying you specifically for over 2 years. What do you mean? Dr. Chen handed me the tablet, showing a detailed intelligence profile with my photograph at the top. This is a foreign intelligence assessment of federal agents in the southeastern United States. You're listed as a, quote, high-value disruption target due to what they call your exceptional local integration capabilities. I scrolled through the file, seeing my own career summarized in clinical detail. But what caught my attention were the sections about my family relationships and community connections. They identified you as uniquely effective because of your deep personal knowledge of this region combined with your federal training, Dr. Chen continued. Most agents are stationed far from their hometowns specifically to avoid conflicts between personal and professional loyalties. But your situation is different. You're a federal agent who never left home. Agent Martinez looked confused. I thought Agent Caldwell worked out of Washington, D.C. She does. But she's maintained continuous personal relationships in this community for her entire life. That makes her incredibly valuable in a situation like this. Dr. Chen gestured toward the tactical operations happening around us. How many federal agents could coordinate local law enforcement, know every back road and building layout, understand community dynamics, and have personal credibility with local officials? The truth of that statement hit me. Over the past hour, I'd been operating on knowledge I'd accumulated over 34 years of living in and around Millbrook. I knew which routes emergency vehicles used, which local businesses had security cameras, which families would cooperate with evacuations, and which would resist. That wasn't training, that was home. But there's more, Dr. Chen said, taking back the tablet. The foreign intelligence file includes detailed analysis of your family relationships. They knew about your father's heart attack, your conflicts with relatives about career choices, even specific conversations from family gatherings. My blood ran cold. How could they possibly know about private family conversations? Because they've been conducting electronic surveillance on your family for over 18 months. Phone calls, text messages, even conversations in their homes and vehicles. She paused, letting that sink in. Agent Caldwell, your family has been under hostile foreign surveillance because of who you are and what you do for a living. The weight of that realization was crushing. They've been spying on my family because of me? Yes, and more than that, they've been influencing your family's perceptions of your career. I stared at her. What do you mean? Dr. Chen pulled up another file. Agent Caldwell, do you remember your cousin Jeremy's comments at family gatherings about government work being for people who can't succeed in the private sector? Of course, he's been saying things like that for years. Those aren't his original thoughts. Over the past 2 years, Jeremy has been receiving carefully crafted social media content, targeted advertisements, and news articles designed to reinforce negative perceptions of federal employment. The same is true for your sister Bethany, your uncle Garrett, and several other family members. The implications were staggering. You're saying their opinions about my career were artificially influenced? Partially, yes. The foreign operatives identified that your family's disapproval of your work created emotional vulnerability they could exploit. So they systematically reinforced those negative attitudes through psychological manipulation campaigns. Agent Martinez shook his head in disbelief. They've been running a multi-year psychological operation against Agent Caldwell's family? That's correct. Every family gathering where relatives questioned her career choices, every conversation about her wasting her potential on government work, every suggestion that she should find something more meaningful, all of that was amplified and encouraged by hostile foreign intelligence. I felt sick. The pain I'd carried for years, the doubts about my life choices, the sense that I'd disappointed the people I loved most. It had all been weaponized against me by enemies I'd never even known existed. Dr. Chen, are you telling me that my family's concerns about my career weren't genuine? No, their concerns were genuine. But they were systematically amplified and reinforced by people who wanted to isolate you emotionally and compromise your effectiveness as an agent. She looked at me with something approaching sympathy. The goal was to make you question your own judgment and second-guess your instincts. Today's operation was designed to be the final blow, making you think you were having a psychological breakdown, would have ended your career, and eliminated you as a threat to their future operations. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just targeted me professionally, they'd targeted the relationships that mattered most to me personally, turning my own family's love and concern into weapons against my confidence and effectiveness. But here's what they didn't understand, Dr. Chen continued, and what makes this case so remarkable. Despite years of psychological manipulation designed to undermine your confidence, despite constant pressure from family members who'd been influenced to question your choices, despite today's operation that was specifically designed to make you think you were losing your mind, you never wavered in your commitment to protecting people. She gestured toward the security operations happening around us. When you thought there was a threat to the president, you responded with everything you had. When you thought your family was in danger, you put their safety above your need for secrecy. When you thought you might be having a breakdown, you still insisted on maintaining security protocols. That's not the behavior of someone whose judgment has been compromised. That's the behavior of someone whose core values are unshakable. Agent Martinez was monitoring radio communications. Agent Caldwell, we have an update from Nashville. The courthouse situation has been resolved. All hostages are safe, and the suspects are in custody. What about Air Force One? I asked. 18 minutes out and on schedule. All security measures remain in place. Dr. Chen stood up, preparing to leave. Agent Caldwell, there's one more thing you should know. Your family is being brought back from the secure location. Director Harrison felt they should be here to witness Air Force One's arrival. Why? Because for 15 years they've wondered what you actually do for a living. In 18 minutes, they're going to see you coordinate security for the President of the United States in your hometown, protecting him from a threat that you helped identify and counter, despite being the target of the most sophisticated psychological warfare operation our agency has ever documented. She paused at the command center's exit. Agent Caldwell, your father worried that you'd chosen career over family. But what actually happened is that you chose a career that made your family, and everyone else's family, safer. The people who targeted you understood that. They knew you were dangerous to them precisely because you never forgot where you came from or who you were protecting. Through the command center's window, I could see 3 black SUVs approaching with my family inside. In a few minutes, Uncle Garrett, Bethany, Jeremy, Mom, and all the rest would step out of those vehicles and see the massive federal operation I'd coordinated to protect not just the president, but the entire community where we'd all grown up. They would finally understand that my boring government job had actually been about standing between the people I loved and the threats they never saw coming. And they would realize that every family gathering where they'd questioned my choices, every conversation where they'd suggested I was wasting my potential, had been influenced by the very enemies I'd spent my career fighting. For the first time in 15 years, my 2 worlds, the family that raised me and the duty that defined me, were about to collide in a way that would show everyone, including myself, exactly who I'd become and why it mattered. 15 minutes before Air Force One touched down at Millbrook Regional Airport, I watched my family step out of the black SUVs and into a world they'd never imagined existed. The transformation in their faces as they took in the massive federal operation surrounding them was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Uncle Garrett emerged first, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something approaching awe as he counted the tactical vehicles, communication arrays, and federal agents positioned throughout the area. Bethany followed, clutching Wade's arm as she stared at the mobile command centers and coordinated security presence that stretched as far as the eye could see. Mom stepped out last, her eyes immediately finding me through the command center's window, and I saw 15 years of worry and misunderstanding beginning to dissolve into something else entirely. Agent Martinez approached them with the kind of respectful professionalism reserved for VIP families during high-security operations. "Mrs. Caldwell, Mr. Garrett, I'm Agent Martinez. Agent Caldwell is coordinating final security preparations for the president's arrival, but she wanted you to understand what you're witnessing here today." Jeremy, who had spent years making jokes about my paperwork job, was staring at a team of counter-snipers taking positions on nearby buildings. "This is all because of Roxy? Your daughter coordinated the most comprehensive presidential security operation in Tennessee history," Agent Martinez replied. "She identified and countered a sophisticated assassination attempt while under active psychological warfare by foreign intelligence operatives. Today, she quite literally saved the president's life." I stepped out of the command center to join them, knowing that this conversation would define our relationships for the rest of our lives. The secure radio in my hand crackled with updates from the Secret Service Advance Team, the FAA Control Tower, and tactical units positioned throughout the area. "Roxy," Mom's voice was barely a whisper, "is this really what you do?" "This is what I've been doing for 15 years, I said. "Not every day involves presidential security, but yes, this is my life. Protecting people from threats they never see coming, handling crises that never make the news, serving the country in ways that have to stay secret." Uncle Garrett was shaking his head slowly. "We had no idea. All those times we worried you were wasting your potential, all those conversations about finding more meaningful work." "You weren't wrong to worry," I said gently. "I couldn't tell you what I actually did, so I understand why you thought I was just another government bureaucrat. But Uncle Garrett, remember when you used to tell me that real success meant making a difference in people's lives?" He nodded, looking stunned. "Every case I've worked, every operation I've coordinated, every threat I've helped neutralize, it was all about protecting families like ours. Protecting communities like Millbrook, making sure kids can go to school safely, that parents can work without fear, that people can live their lives without worrying about the dangers they never see." My secure radio crackled. "Agent Caldwell, Air Force One is on final approach. All security positions report ready." I keyed the radio. "Copy that. All stations maintain security posture. Presidential arrival in 12 minutes. Bethany was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "Roxy, you're actually in charge of all this." I'm the senior agent on site with local knowledge and security clearance for presidential operations, I said. Which means yes, I'm coordinating security for the President of the United States in our hometown. As if summoned by my words, the distinctive sound of Air Force One's engines became audible in the distance. The entire family turned toward Millbrook Regional Airport, where the most recognizable aircraft in the world was approaching for landing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Agent Martinez announced, "Air Force One is beginning its landing sequence. Please remain in this secure area for your safety." We watched in silence as the massive blue and white Boeing 747 descended toward the runway, surrounded by escort helicopters and covered by the most comprehensive security umbrella ever deployed in Central Tennessee. Every piece of that security, from the tactical teams to the communication networks to the evacuation procedures, had been coordinated through my efforts over the past 2 hours. Uncle Garrett found his voice first. "Roxy, I owe you the biggest apology of my life." "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You couldn't have known." "No, that's not what I mean." He turned to face me fully. "I mean, I'm sorry for not trusting that you knew what you were doing with your life. I'm sorry for assuming that because we couldn't see the value of your work, it didn't have value. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to justify choices that were actually protecting all of us." Mom reached for my hand. "Honey, your father would be so proud of you right now." The mention of Dad hit me harder than I expected. "Mom, I know Dad worried about my choices. Dr. Chen told me that even his concerns were influenced by the same people who targeted me today. They wanted him to doubt my career so I would doubt it too." "Your father never doubted you," she said firmly. "He worried about you being alone, about the sacrifices you were making for work he didn't understand. But Roxy, he used to tell people that whatever you were doing in Washington, it must be important because you were the smartest, most dedicated person he knew." Air Force One touched down on the runway with the smooth precision that comes from the world's most skilled pilots and ground crews. As it taxied toward the secure area, I realized that everything I'd worked for over the past 15 years had led to this moment, protecting the president in my hometown while my family finally understood who I'd become. Jeremy was recording everything on his phone. "Roxy, can I ask you something? All those times you had to leave family events early for work emergencies, were those real crises?" "Every single one," I said. "Christmas 2 years ago when I couldn't come home? I was working to prevent a terrorist attack on a major transportation hub. Dad's birthday when I had to leave early? Intelligence came in about a foreign agent trying to recruit assets inside the State Department. The work emergencies weren't bureaucratic procedures. They were threats to national security." Bethany wiped tears from her eyes. "We thought you were choosing work over family." "I was choosing work that protects family," I corrected. "Every family, including ours." My radio crackled with the final update. "Agent Caldwell, Air Force One has landed safely. Presidential security detail reports all clear. Operation successful." I keyed the radio one last time. "Copy that. All stations maintain security posture until departure. Outstanding work, everyone." As I lowered the radio, I realized that Uncle Garrett was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not disappointment or worry, but profound respect. "Roxy," he said, "when people ask me about my family, I always talk about Jeremy's sales success and Bethany's beautiful home and the businesses we've all built. From now on, I'm going to tell them about my niece, who coordinates security for the President of the United States." For the first time in 15 years, I felt truly seen by the people who mattered most to me, not as the disappointing relative who'd settled for safe government work, but as the federal agent who'd spent her career standing between the people she loved and the threats they never saw coming. Air Force One sat on the tarmac in the distance, surrounded by the security operation I'd coordinated. My family stood beside me, finally understanding that my boring government job had actually been about serving something larger than myself, while never forgetting where I came from. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones nobody ever hears about. Sometimes the greatest service is the kind that has to stay secret. And sometimes, the family that questions your choices the most is the family that loves you enough to worry about your happiness. Today, In Millbrook, Tennessee, all of those truths came together in a way that changed everything. My family finally understood who I was. I finally understood that their concerns had been weaponized against me by the very enemies I'd sworn to fight. And together, we'd witnessed proof that choosing duty doesn't mean abandoning love. Sometimes it means loving so deeply that you're willing to sacrifice recognition to keep the people you care about safe. The government job they'd mocked had just saved the president's life, and in doing so, it had saved our family too. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.